dear students, in continuation of lecture series on the subject botany, today our topic is taxonomy and diversity of Orchidaceae. The Orchidaceae is commonly known as orchid family. The orchid has been derived from a word orchis, which means testicle, because it resembles the shape of root tubers of the genus Orchis. The family Orchidaceae was first established as a formal taxonomic category under the name Orchidaceae by a French botanist de Jussieu way back in the year 1879. The orchids, they form one of the world's largest family of flowering plants. In fact, second largest family after the family Asteraceae. They have been marveled for centuries. They are a symbol of love, beauty, and luxury. Greeks held these orchids in high regard because as a symbol of virility. Orchids are attractive yet unusual flowers. The orchids are highly cultivated because of their beauty. So it is in this context that in today's lecture, following aspects of the family Orchidaceae will be discussed in detail. Number 1, taxonomy of orchids, systematic position of the family Orchidaceae, phylogeny, diversity, and economic importance. So we will start from its taxonomy. When we talk about the diagnostic characters of the family Orchidaceae, the family shows following characters. They can be either terrestrial or epiphytic herbs, mostly perennial, and are always mycorrhizal. The flowers here are trimerous. One more characteristic feature of Orchidaceae, the flowers are recipiennate and show attractive labellum. The androecium and gynoecium here is adnate to form a structure called gynocytemium, and the pollen grains are characteristically, or we can say uniquely here, fused to form a structure called pollinia. After this discussion on their diagnostic features, now let us discuss their morphology in detail, starting with their habit. The orchids, as already mentioned, they are mostly perennial herbs, but rarely they can be annuals. They are either terrestrial. The typical example here is the type genus Orchis, or they can be epiphytic. The examples are many. Just one example, the dendrobium. Or very occasionally, they can be saprophytic. Example here is the orchid by the name of Gastrodia. Or very rarely, the orchids can have the habit like wine, what we see in the case of celebrated orchid called Vanilla. The roots in the case of Orchidaceae, they are strongly mycorrhizal. They are tuberous in the case of terrestrial species, and in the case of aerial species, wherein they are epiphytic, they have a spongy, water-absorbing, multi-layered epidermis, which is composed of dead cells. This structure or aerial roots, this is known as velamen. Now the stem. Stem in the case of orchids, it can be either foliate or it can be scapose. The stem can take the shape of a rhizome or a corm. But in the case of terrestrial species, or the stem sometimes can be at its base, it is thickened or swollen to form a structure called as pseudobulb. Aerial roots, as already mentioned, are also present in the case of orchids. Now, the case of leaves. In the case of Orchidaceae, the leaves are usually alternatively arranged. They are spiral, or we can call more technically that these leaves are two-ranked. The leaves can be either basal, that means at the base of the stem, or along the stem. The leaves are often pellicate and fleshy. These can sometimes be reduced to fine scales. The leaves are usually sheathing at base with the sheath completely encircling the stem. The leaves are exstipulate and simple. The leaf margins, they are entire, and the venation pattern here is parallel. Now, the reproductive part of the flower, starting with the inflorescence. The inflorescence can be either terminal or axillary. The type of inflorescence that we encounter in Orchidaceae can be raceme, panicle, or spike, or very rarely sometimes the inflorescence is reduced to a single solitary flower. Now, the individual flower, as already mentioned, that orchid flowers, they are often showy. The flower is epigynous, bisexual, and zygomorphic. One more unique feature of the flowers of orchids is that they are always recipiunate. What is this recipiunate? In such a situation, the floral parts, they get twisted at the angle of 180 degree during the floral development. Now, the individual parts of the flower, starting from the outer part, that is perianth, as it is a monocot, that's why here we have no distinction into calyx and corolla. Here the perianth is comprised of 6 tepals. These tepals are biseriate in its arrangement, that means 3 plus 3. The tepals are apotepalous, or they can be basally syntepalous. The tepals are homoclimatoous. The outer wall with 3 either free or fused tepals is usually petaloid. That means their structure is more like a petal. They are imbricate. Then the inner wall has 3 pre-tepals. This is highly variable in the case of orchids. If there is a diversity in orchids, it is because of this inner wall with 3 pre-tepals. Here, out of these 3 tepals, the median and the anterior tepal is clearly differentiated, separated from the 2 lateral tepals and forms a unique structure called as labellum, or sometimes it is called as lip. The labellum or the lip is extremely variable, both in its shape and the color. And this labellum, it acts as a landing platform for the pollinators. It is typically enlarged with fleshy bumps or ridges, and sometimes it can be succate or it can be spurred at its base. The nectar is produced in a lip spur by tepal apices or in the septal nectaries. Now, discussing the androecium, that is the male part of the orchid flower. The stamens here are mostly solitary, and this solitary stamen is derived from the median stamen of outer wall, and rest 2 stamens, they have been reduced to 2 vestigial stamen nodes. These stamen nodes are derived from the lateral stamens of an inner wall. Sometimes these fertile stamens can be 2 in number, as we see in the case of Apostasia, or even 3. That means we have no stamen node there, as is the example in Nuvidia. The stamens are always adnate with the style and stigma. Style and stigma is the part of gynoecium, that is the female part of the flower. That means male and female parts are joined together and they form a structure called as gynocytemium. It is also known as gynocytigium or sometimes more commonly called as column. This gynocytigium is opposite to the labellum. The anthers on the top of the stamens, they are sessile on gynocytemium. The anthers are bisporangiate, not the characteristic tetrasporangiate that we see in other families. They are here the bisporangiate. Anthers are dithecous, androus, and the dehiscence is longitudinal. The pollen grains uniquely, characteristically, they are powdery or waxy. That's why they are grouped into discrete, soft or hard masses called as pollinia. Each pollinium comprises of a sterile portion called as caudicle, and there can be 1 to 12. Most commonly 2 or 4 pollens that are derived from individual anther microsporangia or sometimes from the fusion products of microsporangia. 2 to 8 pollinia are formed usually per flower. The pollinia plus a sticky stalk. This sticky stalk is derived from either the anther or the stigma. The pollinia plus a sticky stalk are fused together and are termed as a structure called as pollinarium. This pollinarium is the unit of transport during pollination of orchids. Anther connective is often modified in the case of orchids into a structure called operculum, or it is sometimes called as anther cap. This anther cap covers the anther or the anthers prior to their pollination. Now the female part of the flower, gynoecium. Gynoecium in case of orchids is comprised of 3 carpels and the condition is syncarpous. Ovary is inferior here and unilocular one but with parietal placentation. Rarely we see 3 locular ovary also in the case of orchids, but in that case we have the axile placentation. This is a rare instance and is exemplified by Orchidaceae. The ovules are here anatropous, bitegmic, tenuinusolate, many per carpel. Sometimes these ovules can be millions per carpel. The style and the stigma are highly modified here. The style is solitary, terminal, and forms major component of the gynocytemium. The stigmas are here 3, one often transformed into a single enlarged non-receptive lobe. Normally stigmas are receptive, but this one stigma in the case of orchids is enlarged into a non-receptive lobe and is termed as rostellum. This rostellum is positioned above the stigmatic surface. The rostellum often has a sticky pad called visidium, which is adherent to the pollinarium stalk. Fruit. The fruit is characteristically here a capsule, but the type of capsule we have in orchids is loculicidal, or rarely we can see a berry in the case of orchids. The seeds are minute, very minute, numerous in number. The seed coat is crustose or membranous and it lacks phytomelanin. It has only the outer layer persistent, but the inner layer is collapsed. The embryo is very minute, the endosperm is absent and it gets aborted very early in its development. Pollination, very important from the point of view in orchids, pollination modes. The orchid flowers are extremely varied in their form as already discussed, and that's why they attract a wide array of insects such as bees, wasps, moths, butterflies, flies, as well as other organisms like birds, bats, or frogs. Some attract generalist pollinators, but we see many are quite specialized, highly specialized in attracting only a single species as a pollinator. The pollen, nectar, or floral fragrances, they may act as pollinator rewards. Some species of orchids have more remarkable adaptations for pollination. We can say bizarre adaptations for pollination. For example, flowers of Cypripedium, they manipulate their pollinators and provide in return no reward. Some species of orchids, namely Ophrys and Cryptostyles, they show a visual and a chemical mimicry by which a male insect, it gets deceived and perceives the flower as a potential female, as a potential mate. We have a phenomenon called as pseudocopulation. These species of orchids like Ophrys, they mimic the form and the scent of female bees, wasps, or flies, and get pollinated when the males attempt to mate with the flower. In other cases, such as bucket orchid, scientifically known as Coryanthes, a pouch-like labellum is filled with a fluid that is secreted from the gynostemium, and a bee falling into this fluid must travel through the tunnel. Thus, it enforces deposition of pollinarium on its body. The pollinia often becomes attached to the pollinator's body and are often deposited in the stigma, usually at a depression in the underside of the column. In fact, the transfer of pollen grains together with the pollinia is an apparent adaptation, evolutionary adaptation of ensuring fertilization of many of the huge numbers of ovules. In some species, pollination is an uncommon event and flowers may remain functional and showy for many days. Most of the orchid species, they are outcrossing, but selfing also occurs in some cases. Now the fruit dispersal. The tiny dust-like seeds that we see in orchids are dispersed by wind and require nutrients that are supplied by the mycorrhizal fungus for germination. Now the second part of the lecture, that is the systematic position of Orchidaceae. We will just mention few of the prominent classifications, starting with Bentham and Hooker's classification. Bentham and Hooker, they classified Orchidaceae under the class Monocotyledons, under the series Microspermae and the order Orchidales. Then the American taxonomist Cronquist classified Orchidaceae under the division Magnoliophyta, class Liliopsida, subclass Lilidae, and the order Orchidales. Armand Takhtajan, an evolutionary taxonomist, he classified Orchidaceae under the division Magnoliophyta, class Liliopsida. He incorporated the category subclass and gave the subclass Lilidae to the family Orchidaceae and the superorder Lilinae and again the order Orchidales. Dahlgren, he classified Orchidaceae under the class Liliopsida, subclass Liliidae, superorder Lilinae, and again the order Orchidales. Robert Thorne, he classified the family Orchidaceae under the class Angiospermae, subclass Lilidae, superorder Lilinae, order Orchidales. And of late, Angiosperm phylogeny group, they have classified this family Orchidaceae under the clade monocots and the subclade non-communide monocots. Here they have completely rearranged the family Orchidaceae. Previously it used to have its own order Orchidales, but now they have shifted it to separate order by the name of Aspergillus. Now the third part of the lecture, phylogeny of Orchidaceae. The monophyly of Orchidaceae is supported both by morphology and DNA based characters. The phylogenetic relationships within the family have been addressed by several cladistic analyses. Broadly, 5 main subfamilies have been recognized in the family. The names go like this. Number 1, Apostaceoideae. Number 2, Vanilloideae. Number 3, Cypripedidae. Number 4, Orchidoideae. And the 5th and the last, Epidendroideae. The first one, the Apostaceoideae, it is exemplified by genera like Apostaceae and Nuvidea. These are considered to be the basal clade and considered to be sister to the other orchid groups. That means the rest of the 4 subfamilies. Monophyly of this subfamily Apostaceoideae is supported by their anatomical characters like vessel elementous with simple perforation plates, and also they have distinctive seeds. The 2 representative genera, that is Apostaceae and Nuvidea, have retained many ancestral features, such as here the flowers have 2 or 3 stamens that are slightly adnate to the style. Here we have not parietal placentation but axile placentation. Pollens are released as single, not as pollinia. Also they are non-sticky, and also we have here a symmetrical stigma. In contrast to the first subfamily, the remaining groups of orchids, they have sticky pollens and have a broad asymmetrical stigma. Within this sticky pollen clade, 2 subfamilies, Cypripedidae and Vanilloideae, are sister to other groups like Orchidoideae and Epidendroideae. First, the Cypripedidae, exemplified, represented by the famous orchid Cypripedium. The Cypripedidae are clearly monophyletic, as supported by their saccate. Saccate means the slipper-like labellum, and have a median anther modified into a shield-like staminode. They have also 2 functional stamens but lack pollinia. On the other hand, Vanilloideae, as represented by the famous celebrated vanilla, it also forms a clade based on orbiceal sequence data. Also we have in this subfamily the flowers with a single functional stamen, but at the same time they lack pollinia. Many members of the subfamily Vanilloideae are vinous, that means they are climbers, and their leaves show a net veined veniation, and their ovaries are not unilocular but 3-locular. Other orchid groups apart from these 3 subfamilies, the subfamilies like Orchidoideae and Epidendroideae, which contribute about major share to the orchid diversity. About 90% of the species are contributed by these 2 subfamilies. They have pollinia and also completely fused filament and style. Here in these 2 subfamilies, we have flowers with only a single functional stamen, a condition called as monoandry. Among these monoandrous orchids with pollinia, 2 large subfamilies are Orchidoideae and Epidendroideae. The Orchidoideae subfamily shares the apomorphies of acute anther apex, soft stamens, leaves convolute but not pellicate, and lack silica bodies. The Epidendroideae, the second subfamily, share the apomorphies of a beaked and incumbent anther. The representative genera of Orchidoideae include Orchis, Sphaeranthus, Codaria, Habenaria. The representative genera of Epidendroideae are Bulbophyllum, Dendrobium, Epidendrum, Maxillaria. Now the 4th part of the lecture, the diversity of Orchidaceae. As already mentioned, the Orchidaceae is the 2nd largest family of flowering plants after Asteraceae in terms of number of species throughout the world. At present, the family is represented world over by about 800 genera with about nearly 20,000 species. Some of the species-rich genera in this family are Pleurothalus and Bulbophyllum, each having 1100 species. Then Dendrobium, a species-rich genera with 900 species. Then Epidendrium with 800 species. Habenaria, 600 species. Erica, 500 species. Lparis, 350 species. Malaxis and Oberonia, 300 species each. And lastly, the vanilla with 100 species. Coming to this distribution, members of this family Orchidaceae, they show a worldwide distribution, but mostly they are diverse, spacious, high diverse in the moist tropical forests, wherein they show mostly an epiphytic habit. Now the last part of the lecture, that is economic importance of the family Orchidaceae. The members of this family are of great economic importance, in particular their ornamental value. The members of the Orchidaceae are known for their showy and beautiful ornamental plants. The family contains many highly valuable, highly prized ornamentals. For example, Dendrobium, we have Catalia, we have Cymbidium, Epidendrum, Brescia, and many others, hundreds of plants that are grown for their ornamental value. Apart from their ornamental value, there is a species by the name of Vanilla planifolia, or commonly the vanilla. Its fermented fruits, that is the capsules. When these capsules are fermented, they are a source of vanilla food flavoring that we commonly use in our ice cream industry. Dear students, with this we come to the end of today's lecture, that was on the topic taxonomy and diversity of Orchidaceae. In today's lecture, we discussed about the taxonomic aspects of the family Orchidaceae, then we discussed its systematic position, then thirdly we discussed its diversity, and also we discussed its phylogeny. Lastly, we tried to highlight the economic importance of the family Orchidaceae. Hope you have enjoyed today's lecture on this topic. See you again with some another topic. Till then, bye bye.